Hello, everybody. Tyler King here with a new episode of New Review. Today, I am going to be doing the final installment of my year-end best of series, and I'm going to talk about my 10 favorite albums of 2021. Um, a rule that I am going to keep from the first couple of videos that I did is that these are ones that I do have physical copies of. There are a whole host of albums that I enjoyed as well as these ones. I just don't physically have them, at least not yet. Um, and I wanted to start off at my number 10 spot. Love Drips and Gathers by Piroshka. Piroshka is a super group of sorts. It has Miki Berenyi of Lush on vocals and guitar, Michael Conroy of Modern English on bass. It's really what you would expect a band that has those kinds of members to sound like. It kind of harkens back to the quote unquote golden days of 4AD, which makes sense given that Lush and Modern English were both signed to that record label. They did have a debut album that came out a couple of years ago, which I thought was fine. However, I think that this one really ups the ante both in terms of songwriting as well as Miki's voice. I've always loved it. I've always been a fan of Lush, and this really feels like a natural progression of their Blind Spot EP that they released right before they did their last, like, quote unquote reunion tour and broke up. This really feels like a natural progression from that. And if you are a fan of things like Lush or Cocteau Twins or Modern English, I think that this is an album that you will enjoy. That is my number 10 spot. Number 9 is going to be Comfort to Me by Amyl and the Sniffers. Amyl and the Sniffers are a 4-piece punk band out of Australia. And their debut album I just loved to death. And this one definitely follows in that one's footsteps. However, it does have a higher production value given the band's now sort of like worldwide recognition. There are definitely a lot more overdubs on here. Everything feels a little bit more polished, not as rough around the edges, but I think that frontwoman Amy's lyrics are just as funny and biting and like relevant as they were on the first one. Guided by Angels is great. Maggot, Capital. I really like the song Knifey. Laughing almost feels like a self-referential finger being pointed at herself as well as the band, and how some people might think that they're just this kind of like goofy, kind of jokey comedy band, but there is a lot more to them than that. And my favorite song on here is probably going to be Security. Comfort to Me by Amyl and the Sniffers is just a blast to listen to from front to back, and that is my number 9 pick for favorite albums of the year. My number 8, and this is a relatively new one. I mean, they're all new. They all came out this year. But what I mean is I think this is the most recent one on this list, and that is going to be The Path of the Clouds by Marissa Nadler. I've been a fan of Marissa Nadler's now for about 5 or 6 years. Her music, and this album could also be described as this, is very ethereal, very ambient, sort of like gothic country singer-songwriter. her vocals are very airy and impressionistic, I think would be the best word for it. And this album, she says that she was inspired by episodes of, I think it was Unsolved Mysteries. The first song on here, Bessie, Did You Make It, is based off of one of those episodes, I believe she said. And the second song on here, the title track, The Path of the Clouds, I want to say it's about D.B. Cooper. If you don't know who D.B. Cooper is, that is something worth looking up, just for the oddity of it. Um, Overall, I think that it is not as... I wouldn't place this one as highly as the album she had did... At the album that she had done with Stephen Brodsky from a couple of years ago called Drone Flower, I think it was. But if you like her previous albums like Strangers or For My Crimes, this is definitely worth checking out. Another cool thing about this one that I didn't know until I was looking at the liner notes for it is that Simon Raymond of Cocteau Twins plays bass on a couple of these songs. So if you are into more ethereal music, think something like maybe some kind of like Dead Can Dance, maybe like Victoria Land era Cocteau Twins, Angel Olsen, Emma Ruth Rundle, who also appears on here playing guitar on one of the songs. This is definitely an album that I think you should pick up. Definitely an album that I think you would enjoy if you like any of those bands and artists. And that is going to be my number 8 spot. Number 7 is A Body of Errors by Luis Vasquez. Luis Vasquez is better known as being the sole member and creative force behind the Soft Moon, which is this very, almost like a post-industrial project with lots of very like phased guitars, driving bass lines, things like that. And A Body of Errors is a mostly instrumental work released by his own name, and I think part of that is to differentiate it from his material as the Soft Moon. There are obvious links between here and some of the material that he's done under that name. Particularly, I would say that there are a lot of similarities and comparisons that could be made to the Total Decay EP that he had put out as the Soft Moon about maybe like 10 or so years ago now. But this really does stand on its own. It does play out really like one large piece, so it is a little difficult to recommend song by song because I feel like it is something that needs to be heard from front to back to really take it in. If you are a fan of stuff like Hyde or possibly Einstürzende Neubauten, maybe Coil, some of the more extreme work that Skinny Puppy did, Throbbing Gristle, this is something that you will probably enjoy. It's just driving and abrasive, and I very much enjoy it. This is one of the first albums that I got that came out this year, and it remained one of my favorites. Body of Errors by Luis Vasquez. My number 7 pick. My number 6 pick is going to be Fate in 7 Lessons by Cold Cave. Really, kind of like the best way to sum up this album is New Order light. Wes Eisold's influence by, his influence by New Order is just like embarrassingly prevalent all over this album. I mean, pretty much like every single song sounds like something that New Order could have put on an album like Low Life or Power, Corruption, and Lies, which, I mean, look at this artwork, and then look at the artwork for Power, Corruption, and Lies. Tell me that this is not a direct influence. I would say his voice hasn't really changed at all. If you've heard his music before, then you probably know what I mean when I say that. Um, the musicianship is good, and the songs are mostly good. For me, the highlight on here is the last song, "Promised Land," which, to be honest, almost feels like an afterthought because that song was released like early 2019, late 2018. Um, and it almost feels like it got tacked on here because they didn't have any more material. Um, yeah, it's really hard to talk about this album without just like completely comparing it to the music of New Order, but it's nearly impossible not to. It's so much a not rip off, but possibly a love letter to it. Um, and I do feel like it is a bit of a missed opportunity because this is really is the first Cold Cave album in a number of years. And I do wish that there was, first of all, more material on it, but also material that was more impactful. Um, which again isn't to say that this is a bad album. I mean, it's number 6 on my list, so obviously I do enjoy it. I just wish that there was more variety on it and that maybe they'd taken a few more risks. But I mean, that being said, um, Prayer for Nowhere is great. Psalm 23 is great. Promised Land, easily the best album on here. That is going to be Fate in 7 Lessons by Cold Cave. My number 6 pick. Now, number 5. Maximum Sorrow by Desperate Journalist. So if you have paid attention to my review videos throughout the years, you know I very much enjoy Desperate Journalist. Their debut album is probably my favorite album of the 2010s. And I feel like with the 2 albums that had come out since then, which were Grow Up, and I think their third one was called In the Face of the Miraculous, I feel like their sound got less interesting and way more just very like surface level, whereas the first album kind of had this very like textured feel to it, and I felt like their second and third albums didn't have that. But I am very happy to say that Maximum Sorrow definitely brings that back. I don't think that it reaches the highs of their debut album, but I mean, songs like Fault are amazing. Armageddon, Poison Pen, the opener Formaldehyde with Joe Bevan's very bare vocals. It's such a stark way to open up the album. Um, I really couldn't say a bad thing about this one. I think that they really refined their sound, and they're back to being like, for me, for lack of a better term, like they're back to being more interesting than they had been, particularly on their last album, which I wasn't super crazy about. But I mean, this definitely gives me hope for them going forward, that they do have more masterpieces inside of them, because I think that this is a very fine slice of post-punk. If you are into things like, I mean, obviously there are a lot of comparisons of their music to the Smiths, but possibly even something like maybe like the Head on the Door era, The Cure. This is definitely something that I think you will enjoy, and that is Maximum Sorrow by Desperate Journalist, my number 5 pick of favorite albums of the year. Number 4 is going to be Crawler by Idols. This is the like PVC pressing of the album. Idols is another band, much like Desperate Journalist, where their third album left me incredibly underwhelmed. Ultramono was an album for me that I just couldn't stand it. I honestly don't think I'll ever listen to it from front to back ever again, and so I didn't necessarily have high hopes for Crawler, But when they dropped lead single The Beachland Ballroom, I immediately pre-ordered this. Um, I really love the fact that, yes, there are songs on here that sound like quote unquote classic idols. Songs like the title track, The Wheel, Car Crash, the last song, The End, have that, kind of same loud and angular and driving post-punk feel that you would get on something like their first two albums. But then you have stuff like the Beachland Ballroom, which feels more like a like Motown influenced song, or something that maybe could have come out of the Brill Building in the 1950s and 1960s. Opener MTT 420RR is, I mean, one of the most non-idol sounding idol songs that they have. And it's just such a great song. When the Lights Come On is a lot more meditative. Progress is this very like synth filled twinkling piece that I the thing with a song like that is that on its own it may not necessarily work, but in the context of the album, paired with what's before and after it, which are Kalechi and Whiz, it absolutely 100% works. Whiz is like this 45 second, almost like power violence song by the band, where singer Joe Talbot is singing or not even really singing, he's like screaming these lyrics that are texts he had gotten from his old drug dealer at one point. It is just as open and raw as I think their songwriting has ever been. Some of it harkens back to stuff like the songs Television or Samaritans from Joy as an Act of Resistance. But honestly, I think that, like, if I were to rank every Idols album, this would definitely be their number 2 favorite album for me. I love this album. And I recently got to see them with my wife, and it was everything that we could have wanted from their set. They played 20 songs. It was like 2-hour set. It was amazing. And so this is my number 4 spot. This is Crawler by Idols. This is definitely for possibly fans of maybe like Gang of Four, maybe Mission to Burma, possibly I could maybe draw comparisons to the Slits, and Magazine as well. It's just this phenomenal music from front to back. My number 3 spot, and this is just as much a surprise to you as it was to me, is If I Can't Have Love, I Want Power by Halsey. To be completely frank with you, I was not familiar with her music at all before this year. And there was news that Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross of Nine Inch Nails were producing this. I went in with not necessarily high hopes, but I still bought this album the day it came out because I love Nine Inch Nails, and fuck, it's so good. She has a really great voice. Just the songwriting on here is amazing. The tradition, which, I mean, as soon as it opens with that, with like that piano noise, like, you know that's Trent Reznor, whether you knew that he produced this album or not. Easier Than Lying is possibly my favorite song of the year. Girl is a Gun is great. Darling. The Lighthouse. It's from what I either read it in an interview or I saw it in an interview. Trent Reznor said that the way that him and Atticus Ross did this album and did the music on this album was that Halsey would send them the vocals and they would work the instrumentation around the vocals, and I think that is one of the best justices of this album, and it's something that I wish that more modern pop music did. Um, I'm not one of those people who runs around saying like, oh well, pop music is trash and this, that, or the other. Like, oh, if it's on the radio, it's automatically bad. But it does feel like a lot of, like quote unquote like modern pop music, you will get this already finished backing track that then is given to a singer to sing on, with very little input from that singer about the direction of the music, where it feels like this is a complete 180 opposite spin of that, where you have the producers working around the finished or guide vocals first. um, it is a just I don't even know what to say. It's a great album. The instrumentation is great. The lyrics are great. The vocals are great. I think that a lot of the themes of it are very pertinent and are very relevant given the current time and current state of affairs. Like especially like that Supreme Court justice ruling about Texas and abortions there. It's a great piece of music, and I wish that Trent and Atticus produced more pop albums after listening to this, because it's pretty flawless from front to back. And that is If I Can't Have Love, I Want Power by Halsey. My number 3 pick of top albums of the year. Now, my number 2 spot is kind of a combination. And you're going to see what I mean. Because I am picking both the Halloween Kills score and Lost Themes 3, Alive After Death by John Carpenter, Cody Carpenter, and Daniel Davies. I know that Lost Themes 3 is just credited to John Carpenter, but his son and his godson are songwriters and play all over this album and the first 2 Lost Themes albums. I don't even know what to say about these. I have a deep love of John Carpenter's music. His films as well. But his music to me has been very important, particularly over the last 5 or 6 years since the first Lost Themes album came out. It really feels like his music has had this sort of renaissance and reevaluation, where you'll have bands like Ghost or Liquid Swords, or not Liquid Swords, Magic Swords, I think they're called, or I think Dance with the Dead is one of those other bands, who really have taken the sound and style of his music and created this whole new like synthwave and horror synth genre out of it. But listening to something like Alive After Death, you realize that no one really does it better than John Carpenter. The title track is phenomenal. Vampire's Touch, The Dead Walk, the closer, Carpathian Darkness, is just this slow piece that has this very textured organ that comes in about maybe 2.5 minutes into it, that just sends shivers down my spine every time I hear it. And as far as the Halloween Kills score goes, whether you like the film or not, I think it's impossible to deny that this is a great score. I don't think that it's as good as the score for the 2018 Halloween, but also I haven't had as much time with this. It's a bit more atmospheric than the 2018 score was. There is less emphasis and use of the familiar Halloween theme. But I do love the version of it on here. It really feels like the inversion of what you would expect a like modern interpretation of the Halloween theme to be. On here it's very just like sparse pianos, and you have this like choir that is coming in. You also get the return of certain musical cues, like Daniel Davies' bowed guitar that was used on, I believe it was the Shapestocks Allison from the Halloween 2018 score. That makes a return here. It is just a very powerful piece of film music. And yeah, I think that it's great. I enjoyed Halloween Kills. I know a lot of people didn't. That's fine. And as far as Alive After Death goes, I wouldn't place it as highly as the first Lost Themes album was, but I think I prefer it over Lost Themes 2. It's definitely the tightest that this trio has sounded on the Lost Themes trio of albums. I also want to say it's the shortest of the three. Um, Gosh, yeah, it's just a perfect horror synth album that I think people really should listen to if they are fans of that kind of music, or even if they don't know the music, if they just know the films of John Carpenter. I think that they would really enjoy it. And that is my number 2 pick of top albums of the year. Number 1, I'm kind of breaking my initial rule here, um, because I don't have it yet. I have it ordered. I just don't have it yet. And that is Big Mess by Danny Elfman. I have pre-ordered the deluxe edition of it, which was announced at the same time as the standard pressing of it. I want to say I pre-ordered it back in April or May, and I don't think I'm going to be getting it now until February. But they did just announce what all the contents are, and I'm very excited for that. I will definitely do a video of it once I get it. But Big Mess. I don't even know where to start with this album. It's Danny Elfman's first non-soundtrack work since the final Boingo Boingo album, Boingo. And I do sense some similarities between the two albums, or at least seeing parts of Big Mess as a continuation of that last Oingo Boingo album, because the last Oingo Boingo album, for all of its problems, and to be completely upfront, I do not like that album very much. But like the opening song, Insanity, which I think is the best song on that album, is this very long, drawn out piece with a lot of orchestral elements, which, you know, kind of mirror what Elfman was doing in his film composing work at the time. And you get that on Big Mess. You do get some songs that are upwards of like 5, 6, even 7 minutes. You, of course, get the orchestral arrangements, especially on the first half of the album. Like on Sorry, the opening of the song True. You also get things like what's what I'm looking for? Some of the vocal harmonies, like on Just a Human, there are these weird vocal parts that remind me of some of the vocals from the Nightmare Before Christmas soundtrack that he did. He said that it is an album in 2 parts. You have the first part, which is a little bit more meditative and insular as far as the lyrics go. Then you have the second part, which is a bit more aggressive and outward looking. And you definitely get that on a song like Kick Me, or Get Over It, or Native Intelligence. I understand why some people may not necessarily like this album, but for me, I don't see how I couldn't love this album. It is really everything that I didn't know I wanted from Danny Elfman. And I saw a review of it that pretty nicely sums it up, which was like, what a world we're living in. Trent Reznor is doing film scores and Danny Elfman is making industrial music. I mean, he's got both Josh Freese and Robin Fink playing all over this, and both of them either were or are live members of Nine Inch Nails. You get this really kind of a political reinterpretation of the Oingo Boingo song Insects, which is one of the weaker songs on here for me. Um, I would say that and Love in the Time of COVID are definitely the two songs on this album that I could really go without. I feel like the album would be a little bit more impactful if it ended with Get Over It. Um, the first side of it with some of the slower songs like We Belong are just truly beautiful. Dance with the Lemurs is another slower great song. In Time is just almost like heartbreakingly dramatic with its string swells. Um, I mean, I could just go on and on and on about this album. Even though I think that Insects and Love in Time of COVID are weaker songs, there are 18 songs on this album. So you get 16 others that range from good to great. Um, I couldn't even name my favorite songs right now, but yeah, I remember when Happy came out and the music video dropped, just like hoping that Elfman had another album in him. And when Big Mess was announced, it was like I just couldn't wait to hear it. And I'm so glad that at least out of lockdown we were able to get another Danny Elfman album. Whether this will be the only non-soundtrack work that he does for the rest of his life or not, who knows. Um, I am really looking forward to, like hoping that he might tour for it or maybe do like a couple one-off shows. But Big Mess is to me just the best thing that came out this year. And making this list, some of the albums moved around. Some of them went a little bit higher than I thought they would. Some a little bit lower than I thought they would. Um, some albums just ended up not making the cut that I thought would or that I originally wanted to include. But there was never a doubt that Big Mess was going to be number one. And yeah, Big Mess by Danny Elfman is without a shadow of a doubt my favorite album of 2021. What do you think of this list? Do you have a completely different top 10 list from mine? If you do, I would love it if you put it in the comment box below. And if you love content like this, if you want to do things like see these videos that I put up a little bit early, or if you want to get some exclusive videos, please feel free to sign up for my Patreon. I'm going to put a link to that in the description box below. Thank you for watching. I'm Tyler King with New Review, and until next time, keep listening to great music.